and protect our beloved farmers.
I thank the honourable member for Gilmore. The question is the motion be agreed to, and I call the honourable member for Forrest.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The AusVet Plan Disease Strategy for Foot and Mouth Disease says that foot and mouth is the single biggest threat to Australia's livestock industries, and an outbreak would cause far-reaching economic and social disruption in many parts of the community, including increased unemployment in the rural sector. And I urge the government to take this extremely seriously. Every farmer that I met at the recent dairy conference was certainly unbelievably concerned, and everyone that's contacted my office is the same. And I would encourage the government to invest even more in Indonesia and be that good neighbour, because every $1,000 spent will save, every dollar spent in Indonesia will save over 1,000 in Australia. Stop it in Indonesia before it gets here. And look, I want to see everyone's luggage and everyone screened. Every single person is a high risk, not just those that are deemed to be a high risk. Everyone is a high risk. They don't tell the truth on those forms, okay? And I don't know how you possibly identify who is a high risk and who is not when the people who live and work often in the tourist areas actually live in those rural areas where the high risk actually exists. So there's real issues there, but I wanted to touch on the fact and make it a bit real for people, because people know in this place that I'm a dairy farmer and was before I came into this place, and our family is still dairy farming. Well, in our dairy business, this would be really hard to deal with. In fact, it would break our hearts. And so we know that one outbreak is going to shut down every movement for 72 hours. And we know that if one positive is found, then potentially we could be 2 years before we get to export again. That's if we've got the stock. And so at my dairy farm, with the chief veterinary officer, I'm likely to get a regional veterinary officer who will come to my place or our place, and he or she will test every animal. And if we get one positive, nothing moves. No one in, no one out, and not our milk either. And so then that positive will mean that there will be a cull. And the 50+ years that we've put into the breeding of our herd, our beautiful cows, will be gone. They'll be shot and either burnt or buried. So then everyone within a 3-kilometre radius will be tested, at least, depending on what they might find in that area, and there'll be an absolute freeze on any movement in that to start with. Every positive in that perimeter will increase that every single time, increase that area and that perimeter. So no animals on our farm till the regional vet officer says so, 2 years at least. So what do? It affects all our local businesses. I just did a quick rundown in Harvey and I thought, who's going to be affected by this in my patch? Harvey Fresh, that produces the milk and dairy products. Harvey Water, where we get our irrigation. LP and JA Fryer, that we get all our services from. There'll be no income. We saw the massive effect of deregulation in our patch. Harvey Beef will be, no animals in or out of Harvey Beef. They won't be exporting like they do now. Milne Feeds, that supplied the feed, the grain and feed merchants, the livestock agents, all of those will be affected just in my patch alone. The livestock transporters. And in WA, Mark Talbot said at that very meeting his business would stop dead. And he's been begging the state government for more washdown facilities. And so how much food and produce is going to be on the shelves will depend on how many animals are affected. And it does last a bit longer in moist soils. And yes, we'll do everything we can to minimise the outbreak. But I tell you what worries me as well is the feral animals. And if it gets in, how the heck will we ever get rid of it? And that is a very deep concern for us on our farms. Every farmer is desperately concerned about this. So I would say to the government, what you've done so far, get into Indonesia, do even more in Indonesia that you can to stop it there, and let's stop this getting in, and everybody needs to do the right thing.